Hello and welcome everyone. It's Susanne here from the Project Manager Clinic, and we've got another Ask a Mentor session today with the wonderful Margaret Santos, who most of you will know has been working with me on these Ask a Mentors for quite a few months now, and she always has something fantastic to say that's informative and helps other people out. So if you're watching this, and you're not watching it on the YouTube channel, you found us somewhere else, please subscribe to the channel. Information will be in the description below, and we're going to get going. So, Margaret, how are you today?
I'm fantastic and super excited to answer this Ask a Mentor question for this month because I've actually often thought about this myself. And so reflecting back on the answers and research has given me, great advice for myself and for this person that's actually asked the question. And
Wow.
thank you very much for the brave person that asked
Yeah,
this question.
it is brave, and it's actually quite a long question, but I'll just read it out now. And also for those watching, the PowerPoints will be on the website later, and link will be in the description. So this person asks us, is it true that staying too long in project management makes it harder to move up? And we're thinking this person specifically means maybe into the executive. They go on to say, I've been in project management for a while, mostly mid and large projects, and sometimes I wonder if I've boxed myself in. When I talk to execs or VPs, a lot of them didn't stay in project management for long. They graduated into strategy, ops, or product leadership over a few years. I don't know that I don't even call them project managers, but that's another discussion. Meanwhile, I know project managers who've been running projects for 10 to 15 years and they're insanely good at it, but they seem to hit a ceiling. Another issue we should talk about. Companies lean on them to deliver, but don't always see them as leadership material. I enjoy the work, but I don't want to wake up in 10 years and realise I'm stuck in a lane that doesn't lead anywhere. Does project management long term help to move up, or should I pivot into something else to break through? A lot in that question, Margaret.
There is a lot, and it talks about, other types of exec roles and also the project management and leadership relating to that, I guess career.
Yeah.
So yes, let's move on and we'll discuss and tackle this question bit by bit.
Yes. And one of the things I was going to ask you, Margaret, is around certifications, project management certifications. There's a whole raft of them. And just when I look on LinkedIn, there seems to be a new one every single day that I've never even heard of. So do you think they're a waste, or are they worth it?
I think that there are actual benefits in having certifications, and the reason why is to understand who the stakeholders are, what is a project, how it's structured, how it works in terms of the customer, the cost or the amount of money that's put up by the sponsor, and just understanding that, because the sponsor really is the customer, and understanding that, understanding whether there's a benefit, whether there's value, all of that needs to be understood to understand what a project is, the outputs, the outcomes of a project. And so not understanding these items and these definitions, which
Mm,
you learn from the certifications, I mean, you need to apply these in real life, and that's the reason why I think that the certifications do bring value and are worth it. A lot of organisations ask for them, and it's a condition of employment.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
have to say that I agree with it, because it's not like fly by the seat of your pants sort of running a project, understanding the different, stakeholders, the different parts of a project: procurement, closure, benefits, leadership,
yeah.
leadership. So yeah.
And you're probably specifically talking about the PMI's project management professional. PMP, isn't it? There's the AIPM in Australia, and they have a certification. We have got people now with master's degrees in project management. So they're almost like a base level to me in a way, but then there are other certifications over the top that people seem to be getting extra certifications for project management. Are there any that sort of spring to mind, Margaret, that are worthwhile for you?
I think that I know that PMI has the risk certification, and I think that that's a really good one. I think that's a red flag that can be addressed before the project moves ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And look, we've talked about this before too, that project management is changing. You know, things
Mm,
are happening in project land. We've got AI, we've got all
mm,
sorts of different things that now impact us. And we've talked about then maybe the new skills that project managers need to move towards around that analytical thinking, you know, really applying those thinking cells in your brain to
mm.
things that are going on, maybe a more strategic advisory approach. Um,
Exactly.
so, you know, we've talked a little bit about that, but we've got to really future proof our project management career. And I often thought that going into the PMO, sorry, PMO people, I thought that was going to be the dead end. Once you were in PMO, I thought that is it. You're no longer seen as a project manager.
I mean, PMO is a specialist area of
Yeah,
the project management, industry.
yeah,
So, and it's about standardizing and ensuring that you're able to compare projects like for like, so
yeah,
that you're able to make really good decisions. You know, is this project, does this project have a return on investment? Or, and then how do we compare it to other projects that are being put up to
yeah.
say, well, which one do we do first?
True. Yeah,
You might have 20 projects on the go in an organization or even more. And how do you know where to allocate your resources first? And, having this portfolio area and you know, project management office to
yeah,
be able to say, how we prioritize each one, how we compare it, whether something's on track or not. And, having all these statistics enable decisions to be made more properly.
yeah. And we talked a little bit about this in a previous webinar about this portfolio approach and, you know,
Mm,
PMOs being so beneficial. Not all organisations have PMOs, as we know,
mm.
but I think what you were touching on too, which is interesting around the project manager, regardless of a PMO. So the project manager out there in the wild or in the field, um, being aware of portfolio management, what that means to the organisation and what the throughput is and the pipeline and all of those things, which is not maybe traditionally a project management thing. You know, when we're out there in that sort of tactical project management thing. But if we're looking to future proof our project management career and we're looking to move upwards potentially, maybe this is something we need to be a little bit more aware of.
That's right, because this is another avenue where project managers can actually, accelerate and move up in terms of
Yep,
their career.
yep,
And project management office is, I think, a great opportunity for a project manager, senior project manager, program manager to
yep,
actually move into, so that you can basically monitor, analyze, compare, and make sure that all the projects are on track. Make
yep,
sure that, if there isn't, to provide assistance in terms of how you can bring a project back on track by
true.
looking at, what are the things that are derailing it. And
Mm,
so, I mean, that it's a good advisory role. It's a good place to be, just so that you can compare and make sure that everything is, reporting correctly to the board, to
mm.
the organization.
And you have an awareness of what's going on. across the board as well, which is also very good at that level. So let's just talk a little bit about this future proofing. We've talked a little bit, but um, are there things that are making us obsolete? And sometimes there's that perception that we're all about Gantt charts and status reports, but we're not just about that anymore. Um, and then understand what you want and how and where to head. So I know we're talking about that today, with the giving some hints and tips, but you still have to be clear yourself on what the skills are that you need to progress to wherever you're going. And you talked a little bit about the PMO, for example. So are there different skills that you need as a project manager to a PMO person? Yes, I think there are. What are those skills? Like, let's get to know those skills. If you're then looking to move outside of project management land altogether into a business as usual um, type role, that's a lot harder. I've never managed to be able to do that, I must say.
Right, yeah. So in terms of the skills, so we're going back to the first question, so in terms of the technical skills, so you would need to manage those standard things that you mentioned, the Gantt
Yeah,
chart, being able to manage the budget, being able to manage the resources, hiring.
yeah,
I tend to find that a lot of people in projects that I have managed in the past have either resigned, are leaving, and then you're back to having to procure resources, probably interview for new ones, and
yeah,
maybe speak to recruiters, maybe speak to the organization, different team leads, and find out whether BAs or other special or subject matter experts can be obtained and replace the people that are leaving. So you're constantly checking to make sure that you've got resources to you know basically continue on the project and have a handover from the
yeah,
people that are leaving.
mm,
And apart from that, you're also making sure that the project is all the people in the project understand each other's necess- uh, requirements.
yeah,
So you might have different people from different parts of the organization that have a vested interest in the project. And so you're making sure that everyone is on the same page. And so your, I guess your responsibility is to make sure by making sure that everyone's on the same page, so that you might have team or working group meetings to make sure that everyone understands exactly what each person's issues are,
yeah,
risks, and you're documenting that, you're monitoring those. And so they're the technical aspects. You also have to be a good negotiator.
yeah,
You might have to, step aside and speak to people one-on-one to basically address some of the issues or some of the different types of, you know, I guess issues that are like people issues. And so those
mm,
things you might have to, step aside and
yeah.
discuss one-on-one with the person.
Yeah, look, some of those things that you talked about in there were skills that a line manager would need to have as well. Staff management, team management, for example, budget management, all of those things. I think that sometimes people don't see project managers as quite as rounded as we actually are. We are actually doing a lot of stuff that a BAU person would do, but we're doing it in like a concentrated and focused manner. And I don't know, maybe they just don't really see it as well. When I start a project, I often will say, don't have to do it as much now, but I will often sit with everybody at the kickoff and say, now this is what I do. So I'm the program director. This is my role. I'm not this and I'm not that. But I do these things. And just the key people's roles, just tell people what we're all doing. Because so still, and I don't know how this is happening, Margaret, but still there is a misconception about what project managers do in some areas. And I've talked about this before with My real life experience last year where an executive said, well, I thought the project manager just did the governance bit. Like, just leave those agile people to the stuff. Don't worry about it. Okay, no. So, we've got to be clear what our skills are already as a project manager. What skills do we need to leverage or highlight for what other particular job we want to look at?
So, I mean, a really good project manager is really great. A people person,
Yeah,
is a change person, and is an enabler, is a connector, basically procures, and like you said, they have the same skills as a line manager, but even
yeah,
better
yeah.
because they can implement change.
Yes,
And,
they can deliver.
what was that?
They can deliver.
They can deliver.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
originally, a project manager was a change manager as well. It's only now, more
Yeah,
recently, where it's becoming more specialized.
yes.
But I was organizing training plans. I was, making sure that whenever the change was delivered, that not only the technology, for example, was delivered, but the users understood exactly how to use that technology. And
Yep,
so that might have been training plans. It might have been an SME delivering specific training.
yeah,
And the communication, the project manager communicates. That
exactly.
is a huge
Yeah,
component of the
yeah.
day-to-day,
Mm,
of a project manager. It's not
mm.
just about the governance.
No,
And
far from it.
that's right. And the connector part is a huge important
Mm,
part of the project manager's role, because they are making sure that whoever is in a different business unit, say it might be finance, it might be legal, it might
mm.
be marketing, that everyone agrees with what is happening, and the sponsor is aware of all the different types of stakeholders, and they make the final decision if it can't be agreed, for example, in a steering committee.
Yeah. While we're talking about that, this last part on this slide says seek guidance and ask opinions and unlock your strategic career path, right? So go out and seek help and go and talk to a mentor, go and talk to HR, talk to your own manager. You may not have a line manager, you may be a
Mm,
contractor. Go and see a project coach, go and see, somebody to ask them. One of the things that I was just thinking about whilst we were talking is that very often people who get promoted in line manager roles are people that are taking the initiative to change the organisation or to implement a project. So they're out there going, oh, I think we need this. Oh, I'm going to stand up a project. From a project manager's perspective, we don't do that. We can't do that because we're in the project managing the project. So that makes it a little bit harder for us to get noticed. I mean, we often get noticed because we've delivered properly. We'll get noticed if we're not delivering properly, but we're not necessarily in that same seat as somebody in the BAU area that goes, you know what, I think we need to change our whole payment system.
that's
It's
right.
hard.
That's right. And it's usually about whether you can be there to generate revenue
Yeah,
or be there to basically reduce costs.
yeah,
The project manager is there to deliver what's been decided. So that does make it a bit of a challenge, and in terms of actually moving up in terms of the career. But there are different roles that a project manager can, aim to achieve
yeah,
to create a, linear upwards career path.
yeah. And you're going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah,
Um, we're talking now about unlocking your strategic superpower. So I'm basically saying plan like a project manager.
that's
It's
right.
one thing we're really, really good at. So if you have something in your path that you want to achieve, plan like a project manager. That's your superpower. So map your current project management skills to the high demand competencies, like where do I want to go? What do I need? We're good at this stuff, but
That's right.
so many times project managers don't remember that stuff. That's
That's
what we're
right.
good
And
at.
do you know what? By doing this and then identifying the gaps, what you then need to do is decide how will you fulfill those gaps.
Yeah.
And the gaps might be in different ways, which we're going to talk about in a minute,
Yeah.
but it may be through a new role, it may be through learning, it may be through a mentor, it may be through
Yeah.
coaching. I've been a project manager for many, many years, over 20, and I still have a mentor that I go to when I have a little bit of a question or unsure about something. I will
Mm.
always, decide in my mind what I think is the best way to go, but I'll always, refer to a mentor to basically confirm my decision.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you are in your career path, it's always great to have a mentor by your side to help you guide.
It's one of the things that really successful people do anyway.
Mm,
They will always have a mentor. Very often will have a mentor at certain parts of their life, not necessarily the whole time. So also in this, how can tactical project management activities be reframed for a strategic bent? And I think we touched on risk management. That's one of the most strategic, right?
yeah,
And I think that sort of goes with this next one, asserting strategic influence early on, because you can be saying, these are the project risks, and I've often had project risks, but I've also had corporate risks on my project. So once you start to get into that program director and you've got corporate risks, your influence, your level of influence is increased, and the people that you're speaking to are much higher on the rung. So think about that is what we're saying. If you're out there thinking, I'd like to be in this role or that role, think about what your skills are and what are the corresponding roles or skills that you can see in a BAU role or an executive role or even a PMO role or even a change management type role,
yeah,
wherever you want to go. Um, and also, while we're talking about that, it should be just noted that not everybody who's a project manager likes being a project manager. Some people start out as a technical person and they may want to step back into that role um, after they have been a project manager. So that's also a thing to consider, how to do that, and if you want to lead a team or whatever you want to do. So Margaret, can you talk to us now about the career path, the typical career path we have for project management?
yeah. So according to the Australian Institute of Project Management, there are levels of project management and how you can actually go into each level. It's actually found on that website that I've got there, that I've just
Mm-hmm.
put in there. But first of all, you start off with the project coordinator, which is usually like an administrator and
Yeah,
helps with the admin, helps with, collecting data or information, meeting notes, updating, maybe updating the Gantt and things like that. So they're usually like the helper. Then you've got the project manager, which will then be able to manage the resources, the time, cost, and schedule, making sure that it's delivered. The project director would be someone higher level up, and they would be able to do a more senior position on the projects. They may be able to basically be monitoring multiple projects
yeah,
and be able to also manage different project managers. The program manager, which is more specialized, relates to relatable and related projects. For example, a software might be being rolled out across Asia, but each country might have its own project manager. So the
yeah,
program manager would be the person responsible for managing those project managers for a related software, for example, release or
yeah,
implementation.
yeah,
The project management manager, office manager, which we kind of PMO manager, which we kind of touched on,
yeah,
is actually analyzing the reporting for all projects across, for example, the portfolio. They might be able to provide advice if a
Yeah.
project is red, where they might be having a major issue and it's stalling the project timeline or stalling the delivery, for example, and they might be able to help with advice and able to step in and help with some of that
Yeah. Yeah.
resolution.
Yeah.
And then some organisations will also include the senior project manager role, which would be more senior than a project manager role. And the portfolio manager might be someone, for example, I know for example, where I've worked in an international bank,
Yeah.
and the portfolio of projects might be related to retail customers. So they
Yes.
might have a suite of, projects that are being delivered to service the retail client. And it might be a credit card, might be one, a savings account might be another. And so all of those different projects that are being run simultaneously and being managed by different project managers sit within that retail portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah.
And together they are aiming to deliver a strategic outcome, which is to deliver better products for their retail customers, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And that's just what the portfolio manager role would do.
Look, sometimes in where I've worked before, the head of the PMO, if it's a fairly large organisation, is quite an influential person because they have all the information about, what's going on.
Yes,
And it's horses for courses. I don't prefer that role. I have been in that role and got out of it again because I prefer to actually manage it, and I felt like I was too constrained, let's say. I'd rather manage the big projects where you still have a level of influence. So I think what we're looking at here is there are a number of pathways, and even in the project manager area, in my experience, there's almost 5 levels in there. So there's people that can manage up to 250,000, relatively simple, and I'd often put a project coordinator on one of those. Then there's the next one up. Then there's the next one up. Then there's project manager that's maybe managing, I don't know, 10 or $15 million worth. They might be a senior project manager, and then it moves up. So even within that one stream, there are still things that you can aim for to move yourself up.
that's right. So they're the levels within the project management, space.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So they're the typical ones. And then, and when we're in the consulting land or a recruiter, the client will typically say, I'd like this sort of a project manager, or I'd like a project manager, is generally what they say. I'd like a project manager. And then you have to question them, what sort of project manager? Oh, I want a technical one. Well, not really, but that's another discussion. And what we're trying to find out is what's the complexity of the project? What's the size of it? How many people? What's the dollar value? That's what we're actually looking at. We're not caring so much about the technology per se for a project manager. So now from personal experience, Margaret, and you and I
that's
both
right.
had a fair bit of this. How do we reposition ourselves?
That's right. So once you've worked out your career path, one way that I have actually, been able to advance myself is to ask for more challenging work,
Yes.
or to go beyond the scope of, for example, your local country.
Yep.
You maybe want to roll out projects in Asia Pacific, so beyond the country, and expand your scope that way. The scope might be, like you mentioned, Suzanne, bigger budgets. And that's another way that you can,
Yep.
extend your challenging work. It might be going into the program space, higher risk projects, for example, compliance,
True.
where there's a deadline, and if you don't put it in, don't
Yep.
deliver this project, you will lose your license, or you will lose your ability to be able to trade or perform
Yep.
work. Now that is high risk. So and high profile projects might be that a project is very important to strategy, very important
Yep.
to deliver, to enable cost savings, or, you know, those sorts of things that enable the project to be high profile.
Mm.
And I've just mentioned there projects that span across multiple countries is another one. Asking for a title change, applying for higher internal positions is another
Yeah.
one as well.
Oh, okay. So if somebody, and this happens often,
Yeah.
there's no project manager, there's somebody that's sitting in BAU and they're, working away doing whatever they're doing, and somebody comes up to them and says, hey, we've got this project and we just need you to go on it. And we talked a little bit about this a couple of Ask a Mentor sessions ago when that person was pulled out of their normal job and put onto multi-project environment. Um, do you think then that this person, if say a person's asked and they're in finance or wherever they are normally, they're not a project manager, should they really think about this before or just jump into it? Like what they've got it, there's got to be some ramifications, not necessarily good, not necessarily bad, but what can you tell that sort of person, give them some advice, what should they be thinking before they jump?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the project, because if it's a really big project with lots of resources and
Yep,
complex or very high profile, I would advise against that, because that person probably has never done any of that
yep,
sort of project work before. You're stepping into it in a green field, very new, not knowing what to do. So fumbling your way through it, or the
yep,
accidental project managers, what they call it,
yes,
is probably a setup for failure. And so I would actually, if it was a small project, maybe small budget, maybe you
yep,
could step into it to try and learn how to do it. But then I would be very working closely with someone who's experienced,
yeah, some support.
to support,
Yep,
to help guide you through that
yep.
process.
Mm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I, in my career, have come across so many people that have just absolutely jumped. Oh, wow. I'm so excited to do projects. And I used to often think, I don't know why. Why would you be so excited to do it? But they are, but then they get into it. They don't have any support.
Mm,
Very rarely do they have support. They don't even know who the PMO people are, if there are PMO people. Um, so they're almost been set up for failure. So
mm.
I think what we're saying here, if you're listening to us on the YouTube channel, and please remember to subscribe whilst you're watching, um, ask some questions and have a think
Mm,
about it. Oh, some of these things might be imposed on you and you don't have a
mm.
choice, but you could still say, look, I'm not an experienced project manager. Are you going to offer me some support? I need to have that support. Um, and how is this going to affect my KPIs if I've got KPIs?
That's
These are all things.
that's right,
Hmm,
because setting someone up for failure is not a very good tactic.
no,
I think that, you know, sure, helping someone to expand their repertoire of experience, of, ability to do other work that's different to what the mundane day to day in the BAU is, probably what excites them.
yes,
And personally, that excites me as well, because
yeah,
a project a day in the life of a project manager, which we've actually also talked about in a different
yes,
mentor
we
session,
have, yes,
is different every day.
every day, and that's
And
what's
that's what makes it
exciting.
exciting.
Exactly. Now, look, just if you can just talk a little bit more about the repositioning of the skill set toward those particularly higher roles.
Yes, so we did just briefly mention that in the prior slides,
Yeah,
where you're looking at your current skill set, then you're looking at the skill set that's required for these higher roles, and then you're looking to see what are your gaps. How do you mitigate these gaps? And mitigating the gaps might be that you ask for to do work where you're actually learning how to fulfill some of these gaps that you have.
yeah, yeah,
Or volunteer, like I've got here, volunteering in
yeah.
communities also provides opportunities for skill sets that you may not have experienced in your work, and
Mm,
that broadens your skill set. And it also helps with your networks and networking.
yes,
That in itself will then also help you to position yourself into other roles that your networks might actually have, knowing that you're
Mm,
doing a good job in the
yeah,
volunteering space.
exactly. And how often have we had a fantastic project administrator or coordinator, and they've gone on to become a project manager? So if you are a project manager or program manager and you can identify in your team people that have the ability or the desire, work with those people. Just don't just leave them to languish as a project administrator or whatever. Work with them and recommend them, because I
Mm.
have worked with so many, and here they are. I look at them on LinkedIn, and they're off doing projects and all of those sorts of things. So I find that's very satisfying because a lot of these people have come back to me and said, well, that's because you, Suzanne, you spent the time with me, which is really good, and it's part of our own management ability.
Yeah.
Now,
And
you're going to,
yeah,
sorry,
I was just going to say that I've also been fortunate to mentor people where, for example, they were out of work, they needed
yes,
new skill sets. I was able to mentor them, complete the mentoring and project management mentoring with
yeah,
them, and they were then successfully able to secure a job based on
wow,
the mentoring. So
oh,
that
good
in itself
work,
is very satisfying as well, especially
very.
because they were out of work for quite a while.
Yeah, yeah, very satisfying. Look,
Yeah,
you're going to talk a little bit more about this slide in the next slide, but we're talking to answer this question about crafting your career path. So, you don't want to maybe get stuck in project management, or you're happy to be a project manager, but you want to progress through that. So, how do you do that? We've sort of talked about identifying roles that prioritize strategic thinking over just the pure execution. Program manager, product owner is another one. PMO lead, chief of staff, also another one. Take some actionable steps. Project management is our superpower. We can do this stuff. We know how to do it. Develop your strategic muscle. And you talked about this, Margaret. Mentorship, cross functional projects. Go out there and network with other like minded project managers. AIPM, PMI are two that I think of. Build a strategic resume, and I don't mean the one that you're writing down, and narrative that highlights your impact, not just your tasks. So don't just focus on, well, I managed that project budget, that was $60 million, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's great, and then tick, tick, tick. But what did I change for your organisation when I managed that? And
that
that's more the strategic thing.
that's right. It's the value that you bring.
Yeah.
It's the benefits that you bring as well to the organization by your impact that you've done.
Yeah. Now I've gone to this slide, Margaret. It's one of our last, I think, nearly almost last slides. And if you can talk to this, because there's quite a bit in all of this, crafting your strategic career and learning path.
That's right. So, and I think with the mentor question, it is projects are seen as executable and short term and deliverable,
Yeah.
which is the reason why, you can get potentially stuck in a rut, because a lot of projects are, for example, contracts, and
Yeah.
they end, and then, the project manager moves on to the next one
Yeah.
without even thinking about how they can strategically move up. So you to broaden your skill set, think about the value that you bring, the benefits realization, the value in the project that you're delivering, how it aligns to business strategy, and that's usually found in the business case,
Yeah.
how it's aligning to strategy. And in that way, you're seen as a strategic thinker. And as you mentioned, Suzanne, strategic thinking is what the board, for example, would want to see,
Yeah.
and also how you can move into the exec type levels.
Yeah.
And a lot of project managers are hired to write business cases, and that is in line with return on investment, value to the
Yes.
organization, strategic alignment.
Mm,
And so that's one way of showing that you can actually bring value to the organization.
mm,
We've mentioned this already, identify gaps that you might have. based on where you are, where you want to go, and then try and mitigate those gaps by, volunteering, asking for higher roles that, in the organization, asking for a secondment and moving across to another role that's similar, or that you want to actually broaden your skill set and then come back to where you're working and then utilize that skill set that you've learned and bring that back to your position.
Yes.
And as we mentioned, there are different roles like portfolio management, governance, strategy planning, operation, model redesign. And I have mentioned this, it might be volunteering, secondment, it might be within the scope of your own role where you're asking to do your manager's work. Say, when you go on leave, when you're sick, I'd love to help you by doing some of your work, stepping in so that you know that you can actually step away, go on leave, and I'll be able to learn how to do some of your work and be able to help you in your role. And partner with other business units. As a project manager, you are collaborating, you are, basically a connector. So you do need to basically talk to other business units because that's part of your role. And so in some ways, you're seen as, or they're seen as a customer to you, and you're helping them to make sure that the project is delivered to whatever is meant to be delivered to. So it might be the strategy, it might be, the business case outcomes, benefits realization, and things like that.
Well, there's a lot in this question, and we might revisit it, but I'm just going to go back to it now. We've sort of talked a little bit about how people can move up, how they can look to change and maybe not be so boxed in. This person talks about some VPs didn't stay in project management too long. So maybe their mindset at the time was that they weren't project managers. That wasn't what they were going to be. They were doing it for the interim. And then this is interesting too. I know PMs who have been running projects for 10 to 15 years. They're really good at it, but they seem to hit a ceiling and companies lean on them. And this is, I don't think, just project management. This is where you have a person that's really good at what they're doing, and they just keep doing it. And it could be anybody. It could be technical, it could be admin, it could be a project manager. So, I think it's up to the person to decide, is that what I want? Do I want to move up? Not everybody does.
Look, you're absolutely right. I think that some people just want to stay where they are because they enjoy the work, they're really good at it, and they just want to stay where they are. And so that's why they're 10 to 15 years in that sort of same role. They're earning good money, they're doing different things every day, they're in a contract, they roll off one, they roll into another. And so that's actually what they want. They don't actually necessarily want to move up. But in terms of moving up, we have talked a little bit about it. AIPM and PMI talk about the stats in terms of future demand for project managers, and it is high. And I've also heard, because I actually went to a networking event this week, where they're seeing the future of organizations and BAU as not hierarchical, but they're being run and managed by project managers, and it's circular. So you have, companies that it seems like in the future space, that's the way that hierarchy is going to move. It's going to do away with the hierarchy, and a lot of the work that's needed, because change is happening so fast, is the demand for project managers will be great, because it's going to be a circular thing where the project manager is going to be running a project to move into a new change. So it might be technology, it might be position descriptions or reorganization of the organization, and things like that. So that was an interesting aspect that I learnt this week.
Wow. Now that's interesting. Gosh, we might have to talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah,
Um, but I think that this last sentence, does project management long term help to move up, or should I pivot to something else to break through? I think we've given this person a number of different options. And really, at the end of the day, they have to decide, what do I want to pivot to? How much work am I going to put into planning my career path and doing the pivot? And as you said, talk to a mentor, talk to someone. You can always talk to us here at the Project Manager Clinic. We've got some great project coaches that can help you through all of this stuff. Talk to a recruiter. There's a lot of stuff. But the bottom line is you have to decide. You
that's
have to
right.
decide. Probably anything can be a dead end if you're
That
not thinking.
that's right. And so if you want to move into the exec, certainly, that might be the case where you do have to step away and move
Yeah,
into, I don't know, customer retention or some other type of thing that's in the organization that allows
yeah.
you to move up. But as I said, I think future things may change where the hierarchy is going to probably go anyway, and you're going to be
Wow.
looking at circular type of management being run
Sort of
by
like
project managers.
sort of like agile on steroids.
Yeah,
But yeah, how that's fascinating, isn't it? Now,
yeah.
if you want to contact either myself or Margaret, Margaret does not work for the Project Manager Clinic, but she kindly gives her time to be a mentor on those sessions. Information is in the slide deck, which there will be a link to below it when this is on the channel. Um, and you can always just contact me at the Project Manager Clinic and I will pass those details through. So, Margaret, I think it's been fantastic again today. Thank you, everyone. If you're watching out there in YouTube land, we really appreciate it. And please contact us if there's something else that you'd like to listen to. There is now a separate section on the website where you can ask a question and have your question on one of these. So thanks, Margaret.
Thank you. It was a great session, and I wish I'd actually received this advice 20 years ago.
Yes, exactly. I sort of just fell into it by accident, really, which
Yeah.
probably a few people do. But we're going to call it quits now. We're coming to the go no go, and we're not going any further. But for everyone out there, have a fabulous project day. Thanks, Margaret.
Thanks.